Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aaron Keller. Welcome to the Daily Debrief. We're going to take you right straight back into live testimony in the Tammy Moorer case out of South Carolina. This is a case where a woman is accused of kidnapping a victim named Heather Elvis, and testimony is continuing into the evening. So we're going to take you right straight back in as a retail store manager is testifying about purchases that this defendant and her husband made at his store.
People buy security cameras because they want to be secure, right? Yes, sir. And if somebody's being threatened or harassed or shot at, that would be a pretty good reason to get a security camera, wouldn't it? Right?
Yes, sir.
No question about that, right? And all you really know about this case is this transaction, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So even though you work for the sheriff's department, yeah. I don't know how many times I've seen every witness used to work for the sheriff's department, but that has nothing to do with your testimony here in terms of working for Sam's Club, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Your Honor, that's all the questions I have.
All right. You correct?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You may step down.
We would simply ask that Mr. Henry be excused from the subpoena, please, sir.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right. He's free to go.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Go to city attorney's first.
We caught the last couple of minutes of testimony there in the South Carolina case against Tammy Moorer. A lot of details came out in this case today. It's the case of a woman accused of kidnapping her husband's much younger mistress. Tammy Moorer, of course, is the woman, and she's on trial for conspiracy to kidnap 20-year-old Heather Elvis. Moorer's husband was already separately charged and convicted. Prosecutors told the jury they have no clue where Elvis might be, but this isn't a murder case. All they're going for is kidnapping. In court today, testimony from a crime scene investigator about a search which turned up bullets and even a pregnancy test box.
Did you find a bullet in the driver's door handle?
Yes.
Was it a fired bullet?
No, sir.
It was an unused bullet.
Yes, sir.
Live ammunition?
Yes, sir.
Would you consider that a weapon?
No, sir.
Okay. How many tests that were not available to be done at the Sly Fox Trail residence were able to be done once you got towed? Was it just one? Was there multiple?
It could have been, it could have been multiple,
But you couldn't do it at the house?
Right. We didn't do it at the house.
Okay. You did do it when it was eventually towed through a search warrant to the M.L. Brown building.
A more thorough
Yeah.
processing and searching was done on the vehicle when it was brought to the police department. Yes, sir.
Okay. You can't say exactly the date range that you got it from the residence on Sly Fox Trail to the M.L. Brown building.
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. You did testify that you did go to the boat landing, the one that her car was found at, correct?
Yes.
That landing at that area had been secured. There were cops there, but no other persons were allowed there at that time, correct?
Not when I got there, no, sir.
Okay.
Today, a manager who worked with both the defendant and her husband testified about the alleged affair between Sidney Moorer and victim Heather Elvis. There are a lot of hearsay objections in here, but the prosecution makes a couple of really key points.
Did you know him and Heather Elvis to have a relationship?
I was told they were having a relationship, and I asked him about it, and he confirmed it.
Did you see anything, not what you heard, but did you see anything between the two of them that led you to believe they were in any kind of relationship?
Yes, he would go to Starbucks and bring her coffee, Danish, periodically when she was working.
Okay. And did you notice at some point that relationship changed? He stopped coming around?
Yes, yes.
And after it changed, did you contact Sidney Moore to get him to do more work for you?
Yes, I called Sidney one day to see if he could do some plumbing issues for me. And when he answered the phone, I asked him if he was tied up or busy, and he said no.
Objection, Your Honor. Yes.
Tell this court and tell this jury, at some point on that phone call, did Tammy Moore get on the conversation?
Yes, Tammy burst into the conversation and proceeded to tell me how Heather was causing problems for her and her family and spread rumors that she was pregnant by her husband. And she also asked me to fire her because Sidney was not allowed to work for me anymore if Heather was working there.
Attorney Matthew Mangino is with us tonight on the Daily Debrief to break this case down. So, Matthew, first, let's talk about the hearsay there. The general rule is that statements from someone not on the stand cannot come into court, but there's an exception. And one of the key points in the tail end of that exchange we just saw came in under that exception, but it was certainly a bumpy road to get there.
Right. I mean, hearsay is when you present evidence or testimony that's made outside of court for the truth of what was made outside of court, for the truth of that statement. And in this particular instance, the court first sustained an objection to hearsay and then later overruled an objection to hearsay.
A lot came in there, though, despite those objections. I know we'll check in a bit, Matthew. Earlier in this case, the prosecution called a video analyst to try to narrow down the type of vehicle seen passing a couple of security cameras near the scene where Heather Elvis disappeared.
So when I do the examinations, it's a common practice that the police investigator who does the recovery will make note of the timestamp on the DVR and will compare that to the real time to provide an offset for timing. That's kind of a standard process for investigators. I then rely on that offset for timing when I'm doing synchronization. In this case, the real time was determined to be 3:35 in the morning. And so the times on the screen here are offset.
Heard that time, 3:35 in the morning. That's important because one of the videos showed a dark truck headed toward the suspected kidnapping site at 3:39 a.m. and heading back out of the scene at 3:46 a.m. The last phone call Heather Elvis placed was to the defendant right between those two times. That call was at 3:41 a.m. More now from the analyst who tried to determine what was driving near the scene at those times.
I used a Chevrolet Silverado in cab. One was white, one was silver, so two different ones. Dodge Ram 1500, a Dodge Ram Laramie, a GMC Denali, and then I used a Ford F-150 4x4, Ford F-150 King Ranch, Ford F-150 Lariat black in color, a Ford F-150 Lariat red in color, dark red, a Ford F-150 Platinum, and a Ford F-150 Limited. So to test vehicles of different classes, and then to test vehicles of the same class with different colors, and then the same class, same color, same make, model, year, to get them as identical as possible. The vehicles of different classes have different style headlights. So the vehicle, the known vehicle has HID headlights.
So despite the videos from the scene being dark and fuzzy, this video analyst could narrow in on the shape of the vehicle and then the type of headlight. He was looking for a vehicle with so-called HID headlights, and here is what he found.
Those HID headlights are quite different from other vehicle headlights. The other vehicles were distinguishable because of the position of the lights on the vehicle. Some are higher, some are lower, and I don't mean reflecting traveling on the road differently, they're actually placed on the vehicle in different positions. All of those features can be used to eliminate it. So those are the examinations. The first one that I have was number 18. This is the known vehicle compared to a Chevrolet Silverado.
A lot to talk about there. Matthew Mangino, back to you now. So we've got a lot of things going on in this case. We've got a lot of little bits and pieces of evidence about the headlights, the vehicle, but then we've got all this other stuff, talk of a pregnancy test, discussion of this mistress, the victim, being pregnant. Is it enough for prosecutors to say this defendant had a role in kidnapping the woman who her husband wound up impregnating?
Well, that's what they're going to argue, but they have to prove that. And you can prove it through circumstantial evidence. And that's what we have here. We have the prosecution attempting to methodically put a case together, not based on one big piece of evidence like DNA or a fingerprint or an eyewitness, but all these little pieces of evidence that they build sort of a foundation proving their case in this situation beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a tough sell. And they have to be very methodical.
A lot of little paces that could add up there. Matthew Mangino, we'll be back to you in a couple of seconds here. On to another story. Real estate heir Robert Durst was in court today for a preliminary hearing on whether prosecutors have enough evidence to try him for murder. Durst is accused of killing Susan Berman in the year 2000. Prosecutors claim Durst shot her because she had information about the 1982 disappearance of Durst's wife. Durst has denied involvement in his wife's disappearance and in the shooting death of Susan Berman. The hearing, which began today, is expected to last for quite some time. When it's over, the judge will decide whether there's enough evidence for prosecutors to move forward with murder charges. Durst was acquitted in a separate 2001 Texas murder, but was convicted of dismembering the victim in that Texas case. He had argued the shooting in Texas was self-defense. A friend of murder victim Kathleen Durst spoke to Law and Crime this afternoon about today's hearing for Robert Durst. The friend says the victim warned people about Durst himself.
I was in contact constantly. I talked to Kathy, I think the last time about December 15th, 1981, and I learned that she disappeared at the beginning of 82. We shared the best friend, and the best friend called me up when we started looking for her. I knew her immediately because she always said to me, if anything ever happens to me, Bob did it, don't let him get away with it. And I decided to keep my promise. That was pretty much her mantra. That's what she said to all of her friends and her neighbors because she knew.
Strong words there from the friend who also said she went through suspect Robert Durst's garbage to try to find evidence, and that the victim, whose fate might be decided by a California jury, covered for Robert Durst in his wife's disappearance.
March 7th of 1982, another friend of hers and I went and picked up his garbage can where he lived in South Salem, New York. We went through all the garbage, we took it back, we spread it out, we gave everything to the police. One of the things I found was, I don't know if you can see it, but he had prepared an itinerary of the days right after she disappeared, Monday through Wednesday. And it looked like he was preparing in case, the police, he had an alibi. It looked like he was trying to cover his tracks because basically we knew he lied. He admitted later on that he did. He claimed that he dropped her off at the Katona station. He called her that night at the apartment in New York, which is BS. Susan Berman covered for him. I begged the police on the case to talk to the DA and get permission to visit with Susan because, it would be smart. Truthfully, in my heart, I did not believe that Susan would ever give up Bob. She would play her cards close to her chest. But Bob didn't believe it, and that's why he killed her.
Other news now, a surprise plea deal in the case of an alleged serial rapist and killer. Robert Rembert pleaded guilty today to 5 separate murders. Rembert was also charged in the killing of his cousin, a longtime family friend, and 3 other victims starting in 1997. Some of the victims were raped and strangled. Authorities said DNA helped them link this defendant to a series of cases. Still ahead tonight on the Daily Debrief, some might say karma came back around for a man trying to attack his son with a chainsaw. Find out how that attacker wound up being the one with injuries. Plus, a vicious attack at a bowling alley is caught on tape. Police remain on the lookout for the people responsible. Also, an investigation reveals new details about the life of Aaron Hernandez, a man both acquitted and convicted of murders. That and more coming up on the Daily Debrief. New information tonight about the life of a man convicted and acquitted of a series of Massachusetts murders. The Boston Globe reports that former New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez was, quote, sexually molested as a young boy. The newspaper announced the findings as part of a 6-part investigative series on Hernandez's life. Hernandez committed suicide in 2017. He had been convicted of murdering Odin Lloyd, but acquitted of 2 other Boston area murders. Police in Tennessee had a tough time serving a warrant on a man accused of trying to kill his son with a chainsaw. The reason, a lawnmower his son was riding on at the time ran over the man's leg. 76-year-old Douglas Ferguson ultimately needed to have his leg amputated due to the injuries. Authorities say he was trying to attack his son with a chainsaw while the son mowed the yard. Ferguson and his son have been said to have been involved in an ongoing feud. Ferguson is charged with second-degree murder and violating probation. A St. Louis property manager is out of a job for trying to block an African-American resident from entering a property she didn't even manage. Darion Tolles shared what became a viral social media recording of the woman blocking him from entering his own apartment building. The woman manages a different building, but she lives in the luxury property where Tolles also resides. She asked Tolles what unit he lived in, demanded to see a key card, and said his presence made her, quote, uncomfortable. After following Tolles to his apartment, waiting for him to put the key in the door, and watching him go inside, the woman then called police, who responded to see if he actually lived there. The woman's employer fired her and said it does not condone what it called racial profiling. Tolles later said he was returning home from late at night at the office and that he wasn't mad at the woman, though he did wish he could have a conversation with her. Time now for a look at other crimes making headlines across the country with Anthony Velez.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. Authorities in California used Doritos chips to lure a runaway pig back home. Deputies from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department released footage of a deputy luring the large pig back to its secure pen using the Doritos she packed for lunch. Authorities reportedly knew where the pig lived due to previous calls. A former contestant on American Idol is now facing prison time after being arrested on drug charges in Virginia. 31-year-old Antonelli Barbo was arrested in Norfolk after reportedly arranging the sale of more than 100 grams of heroin. Barbo was one of the final 16 competitors during the 2007 season of American Idol. She is now charged with suspicion of felony heroin distribution and could face up to 40 years in prison if convicted. Authorities in Michigan are searching for 2 men caught on camera nearly killing an employee at a bowling alley during a violent attack. A group of men allegedly entered the Apollo Lanes in Roseville and reportedly were making a disturbance before being asked to leave by the unidentified 28-year-old victim. That's when the vicious attack began. Both suspects remain at large. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for the Daily Debrief.
Matthew Mangino back again tonight. Matthew, a shocking attack there. If they catch the people responsible, what kind of charges might they be facing?
Well, they're certainly going to face an aggravated assault charge, a felony type charge, because there's clearly intent here to cause serious bodily injury. They hit him with a chair. They hit him with a bowling ball in the head. So certainly there's a basis for felony assault charges.
There's certainly that. I mean, gosh, the aggravated part comes from the bowling ball, the weapon itself there. But, these assailants are pretty clearly seen in the pictures here. So is it possible that we could get a shot at actually seeing an arrest?
Well, yeah, I mean, the video it depicts both of them. You see their faces. Hopefully someone's going to come forward and be able to identify these individuals so that they can be brought to justice.
I want to dial back a little bit further here. We talked about the Robert Durst case earlier tonight, Matthew. So the friend we interviewed here at the Law and Crime Network is pretty certain of guilt, and certainly that's her opinion. But let's talk a little bit more about the status of the preliminary hearing in that case. It's a preliminary hearing. It's in California. It has to do with a crime in California, even though the wife's disappearance was from back here on the East Coast. But we're talking about a preliminary hearing stage where the judge has to vet what kind of evidence is there and is it enough. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what the preliminary hearing is designed for and what the outcome might be?
Well, the preliminary hearing is a probable cause hearing. So what the judge at that level has to do is determine, is there sufficient evidence for this case to go forward? The burden of proof is nowhere near what you would have at trial beyond a reasonable doubt. Here in Pennsylvania, for instance, it's referred to as a prima facie case, which is more likely than not that a crime may have been committed and that this defendant committed the crime. So it's the very early stages of the case. We're not going to hear all the witnesses. We're not going to hear all the evidence. The prosecution is only going to put enough evidence forward so that this case can move forward to an actual trial.
So there's a chance we could be seeing a lot more evidence if indeed we get to a trial. But at this stage, it's because the threshold is low, we might not be seeing everything.
Right. Typically, a prosecutor is not going to present all of their evidence at the preliminary hearing because there's no need to do that. The burden of proof, the threshold is so low that you can get by without presenting all of your evidence. And that way, you protect some of your witnesses and, you go forward with the case to trial.
I want to go even back further. We were talking about the Moorer case out of South Carolina. We were hearing that was supposed to have wrapped up by now, but it seems like the case is progressing more slowly than we thought. My guess is that prosecutors are making sure they get absolutely everything possible in front of that jury.
Right. And sometimes in cases like this, you sort of make a big thing out of little things because each little thing is another block in putting your case together. So evidence that you might not have spent a lot of time on in a typical trial. In a circumstantial evidence case, you're going to spend more time because it's a process. You're building a case as you go along, and that's what the prosecution is trying to do here.
We remain waiting to see exactly how far the prosecution goes and when the prosecution is going to rest up. Well, Matthew Mangino from Pennsylvania, really appreciate you being on the Daily Debrief with us tonight.
Thank you.
A reminder, of course, that here at the Law and Crime Network, we are streaming live trials from at least 9 a.m. until at least 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and our live coverage will pick up starting tomorrow morning. From all of us at the Law and Crime Network, this is Aaron Keller. Have a very good evening, and we will see you back here in the morning.